when you have a sum of money, you can't just take that and take it out to an empty lot and put it on the ground, and a factory is going to just magically pop up. I mean, it doesn't happen that way, right?
Oftentimes, we like to simplify things, keep the cookies on the lower shelf, so to speak. However, there's very little about our world that fits this mold. Are there black and white moral issues? Certainly. But when it comes to understanding our larger world, economic realities, political dynamics, religious cross-sections, historical pressures and patterns, conflict zones, military actions, well, things become more convoluted, more nuanced. Part of what Orbis Century does is to pry into that complexity to then compel ourselves to think seriously, logically, biblically, as we attempt to wrestle with the challenges of our day. To that end, George Olson, Director of Geopolitical and Economic Research at Orbis Century, has recently been on the road attending conferences on economic issues and global military developments. So today, we're going to explore some of those complexities. Before we do, however, if you're new to Orbis Century, we are a non-profit ministry organization dedicated to analyzing trends, equipping and training so that we can act as Christ's ambassadors, to engage not in the culture war, but with an eye to cultural diplomacy, to speak truth with grace. Check out our website by following the links in the show's description. Now, George, you've been to some interesting places, and with that, you've had the opportunity to have some really serious conversations. And I know that one of the places you attended was Special Forces Week. Could you tell us more?
Yeah, Special Operation Forces Week is something they do every year in Tampa. And it's where they get together, kind of this convergence of industry players, investors, the Special Operations Forces personnel, people that are program managers, and get together and have a forum and talk about what things need to be tackled and what things need to, what are the driving things that are happening within the military. And one of the reasons why it's really important, why it really is something to pay attention to, is because even though special forces, from my understanding, make up only about maybe somewhere between 3 and 5% of the U.S. military, they account for about 20 to 25% of the U.S. military's operations.
That's significant.
Yes, just in terms of the numbers of incidents, I think. And so you have a small number of people doing, bearing a huge part of the work. They are also, that is also the area where they innovate with, the newest weapon systems, and they have a lot of connection to different people. Some of the things they found out, like different contractors will actually interact directly with an operator when they're doing the testing and everything. So like you have a special forces operator and they're out on the field, they're out on the range, and they're testing some new system, and the engineer that built that system knows him personally. They've talked through the development of this whole thing. So it was really interesting to see where this whole thing is going and why it's important. And I would say, just kind of by way of introduction, that's kind of the main thing of what Special Operations Forces is. Now, there's other kind of some big picture implications of what we see, but in essence, it's sort of like Special Forces is the tip of the spear in what's going to happen in the developmental side of where the U.S. military is going.
Sure. And Special Forces is rapid. It's a rapid reaction, has a rapid reaction capability. It's the speedboat versus the aircraft carrier.
Yeah, that's right.
Quickly, though, this might be on somebody else's mind, it's on my mind, how many people were in attendance at Special Operations Week?
It was pretty big. There were over 20,000 people, I think. I think they said around 25,000. So it's a pretty big deal. And of course, I didn't realize that. Well, actually, I probably better not say that. But there's a lot of industry. I would guess maybe a third of the people there, maybe more than a third, between a third and a half of the people there were actual active duty military.
Okay.
And it wasn't only about the, interestingly enough, it wasn't only about the technology. There was actually quite a bit about things they're doing in PTSD, in healing, pursuing healing. I talked to one guy for about a good 20, 30 minutes about the different things that they are working with in terms of helping heal soldiers from PTSD. Now, at this event, they actually didn't talk so much about the use of psychedelic drugs.
Okay.
In that, but at the event that I went to the week prior, there was a speaker, and that was an economic research event, and there was a speaker that did a full-on presentation on how psychedelic drugs have helped soldiers to overcome PTSD and the different methods that they're using in and the different types of things that they're pursuing in that. So.
My goodness, that really is the narrative, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's such a strong cultural narrative now.
It really is, yeah. It's something that, and you can't argue with the testimonies. I mean, you've got these people, like, there was a testimony of a particular fighter pilot who had, the testimony he gave, and I won't say his name, but there was a fighter pilot that was in operations in Iraq at one point, and he knew that and he had told his superiors about this before. He knew that the targeting for dropping the bomb or the missile, whatever it was going to land in error. It was not going to hit the target. He had seen it on the test range. He had told them. They had said, no, it works. Now, I didn't get the full story, so I don't know what basis they were saying it works. When he made the decision, when he was in his operation to drop that guided bomb, the computer made the error like he expected it to. He had to obey the order.
Right.
But he didn't want to do it. It didn't hit the group of terrorists. It actually fell on a family that were having a wedding and killed some, I don't know, some 40 or 50 innocent civilians.
Wow.
And so he went home and he became so distraught over that. He couldn't get over it. And his testimony was how he couldn't get over it. He ended up getting a divorce. But finally he found some relief in that he was able to come to a sense of closure that, I don't know if it, but it all happened through going down to a clinic in Mexico and taking the psychedelic drugs. And I think about, like, I went through trauma and pain and things like that on the mission field. Not the same as a military type of thing, but I have been diagnosed with PTSD as well as other people in my family because of what we went through on the mission field. And I found hope and healing through Christ alone.
Right.
And I'm not saying that psychedelic drugs doesn't have, if it's done the right way, there may be some medical effect. But that narrative that this is the solution that we've all been looking for. Jesus is the solution that we've all been looking for. And to understand how to take him in faith is the right way. But anyway, so we kind of got off of Special Operations Forces. But
that's interesting. And just to kind of bring that around, close that up. Last year, when we were at Burning Man, I was at a workshop, and you didn't attend this one with me, but I was at a workshop where we had an Israeli military operator, I'm not sure if he did special operations, but I mean, their life is conflict. Just it's the Middle East. It's a conflict existence, and his whole discussion was PTSD healing via psychedelics, including his interactions with special forces, other military actors, and one of the things in listening to his talk and other talks like this, and this lands in a way with what we're discussing in terms of special operations, is that this is the answer being pushed for PTSD, for trauma. And the Christian community, for the most part, doesn't even know the conversation's happening.
Right.
So the Christian community at some point has to awaken to this conversation and then wrestle through it with its complexity, with its nuance. And I think I keep saying I think, that's a wrong way of saying it. I know that the real conversation is not about does this work or does this not work. The real conversation is what is the worldview shift in using these substances, because that comes with it constantly. And the therapy side seems to almost be like a just one element of what is in reality something that typically ends up shifting a spiritual perspective. So that, I think, is the area where the church needs to concentrate on why this is problematic, and recognize, there's a lot of reports, clinical reports demonstrating that there is effectiveness, efficiency with it, but that there is this other component that we can't hide, that we can't ignore, and that's the spiritual element. So, okay. Then back to special operations, and the concept of this fitting within a war economy,
Yes.
because that's kind of where I think we're landing with this. Talk to us about that.
Okay, so very interesting. I definitely got the impression that there's a wide industry and government working together to push a broad-based adoption of ramping up the military industrial base to meet the challenges that we're facing. And the whole face of war has changed because of drones, because of drones, autonomous vehicles, missiles, and all the different things like we're seeing happen in Ukraine, especially, and what's happening in Iran, all those different things. The military started waking up about 3 years ago as we came out of the pandemic to the condition that the U.S., that our whole society, our civilization faces, with China trying to take, especially China, but with China trying to dominate every single industry and making great strides and great efforts to take over market share and to control every single industry. And while they're doing that, to build up their industrial base, which supports both a civilian production capacity and a military production capacity. And so one of the ideas behind the concept of total war is that in a total war scenario, all areas of society completely shift their focus, every single part of society, because we're facing a war that is an existential threat. So everyone gets together in order to combat this existential threat, because if we don't, we will cease to exist. Our civilization will be destroyed. And what we see, we saw in World War II, you saw automobile factories were retooled to produce military vehicles and airplanes and things like that. We are starting to see those kinds of things happen with the U.S. military. They're just kind of the shoots of it. It's because the entire U.S. industrial base is not geared that way right now.
Right.
Whereas, but one of the reasons why it's not geared, or why it's starting to gear up that way, and the Special Operations Forces people are the ones that recognize it more so than the rest of the country, is because China and Russia both have been geared that way. And people may not realize it. I mean, when China, makes robotics, then maybe they just want to produce things and sell things, but their entire system is built around the idea of displacing the United States. And General Robert Schneider wrote about this in one of his books. So that how they have geared everything toward, changing the entire world order to displace the United States, to displace Western-led world order with them. And so if we have a revolutionary Marxist government that takes over the entire world and pushes out their ideology, which they've already been doing in a lot of areas in the Pacific, in the Western Pacific, to first establish that regional hegemony over in the Western Pacific, that is a very, very dangerous prospect for the way the world looks in the future. And so, coming back to Special Operations Forces Week, what I saw is the advancements that are being made systemically. They have created a program called Vulcan, which you can go and sign up for, and they are encouraging anybody that has any idea to just go in and sign up, and they will get encouragement. You have to probably sell your idea. I haven't gone fully into the Vulcan program, but you have to, kind of sell your idea. And if it's an idea that looks like it may have merit, may be beneficial, and there's certain parameters that they want to set up within this whole system. One of the reasons why they want to coordinate it through a particular platform is so that people will standardize on certain things like communication, like electronic communication. So if one person builds a particular type of drone and another person builds a particular type of missile defense, that they are following the same standard communication protocol. So if one unit is using that drone in one area, and just over the next hill another person is using that drone in another area, the missile defense doesn't shoot down our own drone. That kind of thing. So
right.
So if they create this, and they're really encouraging and pushing this, a lot of the big and drone defense is a really big part of where a lot of these things are going.
Oh, that's huge. Absolutely huge. Okay, so I don't know enough about the U.S. military, its logistical internal structure, to be able to comment with any sense of certainty. I understand the concept of standardization within NATO. One of the hallmarks of being a NATO member, whether it's Canada or a European nation or the United States or Turkey, is that you're supposed to be able to standardize platforms across the domain. And that's a big part of being a NATO member. You've got to be able to have interoperability between nation and nation as equipment comes together on the battlefield, or even in terms of training or other elements of logistics. Within the United States, is when you consider, let's say, your different branches of the military, because you have a number of different branches. The interoperability, that's what this program seems to be geared towards, is, hey, you have a new idea, but we want to make sure it's interoperable across the range of new products and new ideas and developments. I can see where that's tough, really tough to do, and yet at the same time really important. If you don't have those standards on the battlefield, you've got too many operating systems that now there's conflict. And I've got friends in the U.S. military, including on the communication side, who've talked to me a little bit about the communication the problem of interoperability, just at a communications level, from division to division, from across the network. So it's like, okay, yeah, if you don't get that right, that costs lives.
Mm-hmm. It does cost lives. And the other thing that it does, and this is something that I'm sure they're aware of, but it also adds an extra layer of defense that you have to build into the integrated system, because the cyber defense is really important. You have, because we know, we have in both in North America, in the United States and Canada, we have been subjected to massive cyber attacks by state-sponsored actors from both China and Russia. And From what I understand, they've been doing this for years. I remember about 4 years ago when I was at my first Prophecy Watchers conference in Colorado, and in the Airbnb where I was staying, there was a young man there from the Space Force, and he didn't give me any specifics, but I was talking to him about it, and he said that yes, our satellites are constantly being targeted and threatened, and they know that they are state-sponsored actors from the Chinese government. So like there is already a cyber war that is going on, and it's and they've been exceedingly aggressive, apparently. So
very, very interesting. So when you think then in terms of total war and building an economy towards the execution of total war, I mean, you're right. The Chinese the Chinese industry is dual purpose. It's dual use. It both serves a consumer and a military function. How then does a war economy? What would a war economy look like in the United States? I'm just trying to wrestle through in my own head what this might look like, because in China, it's centralized. It's all centralized. It's a control structure that's where in the U.S. it's more. It seems to be more market, or it is more market oriented, more decentralized.
It's more decentralized. I think in a free society like ours, and people might laugh that we're not really a free society, but leaving that aside,
yeah,
in a free society. The difference is everyone in the society believes in the cause, and so that's what happened in World War II. It's in the Civil War too, but the everyone in the society believes in the cause and chooses to operate in that manner, and they don't do it because the government is forcing them to. There are incentives because there are economic incentives, but it is also because they believe in the cause. And so what it would look like, I guess, is that you'd see a lot of pushback against regulations that stifle industry, a lot of things that hurt industry. And we saw that in World War II in the 1930s. President Roosevelt, even though he was more on the political left side, and he was chastised by some of his political allies when he, as they recognized the need to ramp up production, and so he relaxed a lot of regulatory restrictions, in particular at that time, which had to do with protection for labor unions and things like that. But we would see them more. I think we would be more likely to see a reduction in environmental restrictions. Would be more likely to see a reduction in more lawsuit. When environmental lobby groups throw up a lawsuit to block production of some particular thing, you're likely to see those things getting tossed in court, because the overall sentiment is to recognize this is everything. When everything becomes a matter of national security, and that can be dangerous in and of itself, but when everything becomes a matter of national security, the government is allowed to, government and the players that are on the road, that are helping to solve the problem of national security, are given much more free rein. Now they will be given economic incentives, they'll be given tax breaks, and the big picture wise, I mean, you could see a lot more factories pop up that are small factories that are producing things. I could easily see a lot more people buying 3D printers in order to print, in order to start printing components that might work for some particular little thing that's going to go in somewhere. One of the things, but there are other areas like, I was reading a friend of mine on LinkedIn who was saying how we talk a whole lot about artificial intelligence and the production of chips and how we need to ramp up chip production. And so we're trying to bring back ramp up fabricating, fabs. They call them fabs, where they fabricate the chips into the United States, and that's a great idea. We need to do that. But when you make the chips, you got to put them on a circuit board, and we have not ramped up the production of circuit boards. We need to bring back production of circuit boards because those chips have to go on those circuit boards. So things like and as we see these things, it goes in fits and starts because so much of our production of all these things actually depends on things that come from China, and China doesn't want to sell us those things, and so we end up relying on Chinese companies that are like that are in the mindset of, well, we really just want to have business, and if we can't avoid going to war, which we do want to avoid going to war, as long as we're not at war, China is not going to block shipping of everything to the United States. So we can build up some of those things.
Well, this reminds me, George, of the conversation that you had when we were at the NATO forum, the NATO dialogues last year, this time almost, which is hard to believe. But wow, it's already been a year ago since we were at the NATO dialogue forum, and you had brought up this issue of component supplies in one of your questions to the panel. And there's a gentleman, I believe he was from England. I believe he was a lord, a member of the British system, parliamentary system, coming up to you and going, "You're right." I mean, I if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the issue of magnets with electrical motors.
Yes.
And how, you can ramp up production of all kinds of things domestically, but everything, literally everything that's mechanical has an electrical motor or some type of electrical motor component to it. Mm-hmm. And if you can't produce magnets at home, and if all your magnet production has gone overseas as it has, then you're missing a crucial component to making these parts at home, and it's just you just can't turn things on and off. It's not like, it's not putting up a gas station is nothing compared to putting up factories that are going to be building specialized magnets from scratch. It's just good luck. Totally different realities.
Well, one of the interesting things about all that is that our society has become so over financialized, like that. You just look at what's going on in the oil market, for example. That the price of oil is controlled by the futures market, or has been controlled by the futures market for all these years, because the futures contracts that they trade on the open market, these paper contracts of how much you agree to buy and sell oil for. A lot of times those contracts can be closed long before they come to reach expiration. So the underlying commodity that holds the contract never has to exist. And but now that we have a supply shock with the Strait of Hormuz being cut off, the actual price is getting forced to be priced at its actual material cost. You can't take paper contracts and the money. I mean, when you have a sum of money, you can't just take that and take it out to an empty lot and put it on the ground and a factory is going to just magically pop up. I mean, it doesn't happen that way, right? You have to take the money, find the skilled labor, if it exists, to get it, buy the materials and ship it there, and pay the engineers and the design and the plans to build the factory, and you have to do all these physical things. And so much of that whole infrastructure depends on supplies that have come from China. And the motors is a perfect example, and they are trying to, they're hoping, like one of the things like this Vulcan program at Special Operations Forces, they would love to have people that are manufacturing, that have figured out new ways to manufacture motors. Maybe we don't need neodymium, or maybe we can use some other kind of rare earth that doesn't depend as much on China.
Right.
So, and then you also have companies that are building up rare earth processing in the United States, but these things take time.
Right. This is, and I don't think people realize. In fact, I know people don't realize. Just looking at the comments over the last year and a bit on Twitter, especially when Donald Trump was saying, "Hey, we're going to acquire," the rhetoric of "we're going to acquire Canada," and then at the same time saying there's nothing that Canada provides that America doesn't have already. And then watching the Twitter comments and the comments even on Facebook, it's people are like, "Yeah, there's nothing we need from Canada, blah blah blah." Oh, sorry, you don't have enough potash, you don't have nickel refinery, you don't. There's a uranium grade that comes out of Canada that's specialized. You don't have that. The list goes on. But it's not just Canada to the U.S. It's every country in the world not every country in the world. That's it's a generalization. But the developed world has a global trade system. And so there's products, there's materials, there's resources from one part of the world that is used in a different part of the world, and that's what we've created. We've created this global supply chain. And it's not so easy to just say, "Hey, we're going to, drill baby drill." Doesn't exactly work when you don't have that. It's not even there. So, it may take you decades to drill baby drill. What are you going to do in the meantime?
Well, one of the most interesting examples that it's kind of coming up a lot in the news right now, it's in the news cycle, is SpaceX. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And they're a good example because 10 or 15 years ago, when they were putting things together for their company and what they wanted to do, at some point, Elon Musk realized, I got to have control of my own supply chains. And so he did not build a supply chain that depended on outside sources. Basically, for SpaceX building their rockets and putting their stuff together, from my understanding, they pretty much make everything themselves.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah. And as a result, in this current environment, nobody can compete with them. The closest competitor to SpaceX as a civilian company trying to put rockets into space is Blue Origin. And you saw, last weekend when the Blue Origin rocket blew up. They're not anywhere close. They will get there. I mean, I think they will get there. There'll be other companies, but SpaceX is the big one, and now they're going to have this huge IPO.
Right.
And,
right.
So you have SpaceX with this huge IPO right now, and you have Anthropic, which has created this one. Their two specialties of AI in Anthropic. One is the Claude coding program, where you can just ask it to create a program and it'll do the whole thing, and the other is the Claude cyber defense. From what I've read about in the news, and I need to learn more, go more in depth on those things. But they're both having an IPO at the same time. Right. And so both big examples, and
So at South by Southwest, at one of the workshops we attended, which was on following the money, a fascinating workshop. It was explained that there was roughly 900 major hedge and investment companies in the world. Like, we're talking the big dogs. Yeah. And that they are at this point investing roughly 70% into AI. And a question from the audience was, what other industries, what other programs are being ignored? And the response back was anything not AI. Now, I understand the importance of AI, but then the question that immediately comes to mind is you were describing supply chain problems and the inability to even produce, let's say, a factory. By focusing so much attention just on AI, are there gaps that may show up, especially if we're talking about a wartime economy, in the production of components and materials that are not AI, the actual hardware. We're not seeing, there's no buzz on, hey, let's build a factory for magnets. There's no buzz on, let's create a factory for developing this non-sensational product. But AI is the dominant conversation.
So in this discussion, we talked a lot about an emerging war economy mindset, which is taking root in the industries connected to the Special Operations Command, but has yet to take hold of the overall population of the United States and other Western countries. Stay tuned for our next episode, in which we will discuss what might be the catalyst to transition the overall societal focus from apathetic self-absorption to a full-blown war economy condition.